What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 6 of the podcast. This is Miles, and today I'm here with another super special guest, Mr. Steve Adcock, who is an early retiree and member of the FIRE, or Financial Independence Retire Early movement, who shares his no BS personal finance advice on his blog and social media accounts to inspire others to take control of their financial future. Thanks for coming on today, Steve. How you doing?
You are very welcome. I'm doing great. How are you doing, Miles?
Doing super excited. So this is kind of an interesting fact. So Steve was actually featured on Market Watch back in April or May, and I had seen his video and followed him on social media during the same time and for months, and I didn't put two and two together. It was the same person for a little while. So it's definitely cool, and we were talking about it earlier. It's just obviously a very small world and just awesome to get this guest on. So Steve, if you want to give a little background on yourself and how you got into all this stuff, and especially your history actually as an early retiree and how that all went down.
Well, for me, it really started with hating my job. It was really that simple. I didn't like what I was doing for a living, but yet I was making good money. So I was the golden handcuffs kind of person where you get paid so much that you just can't bring yourself to quit or change your career or do something different because you're making so much money. But on the other hand, you can't see yourself doing that for the rest of your life. So I felt really confined in my career, and I knew that I could not continue doing that. So that was the base. That was like the foundational element of achieving financial freedom for me, as well as my wife. So if I loved my job, I would not be sitting here right now. So I'm kind of, in a way, I'm glad that I hated my career because this is way more satisfying to me.
Mm-hmm. And so around what age did you start to realize that not only that you weren't liking what you were doing, but there was another route to potentially go?
Well, strangely enough, I never, like out of college, from the day I set foot into an office, I never really, I was never all that impressed. I was like, well, this is it. I mean, yeah, it's work, you get paid money, but I had a very different impression, very, very different impression of working in corporate America, and it never really panned out. But I just assumed, especially early on, before I had money, that this was just what people did. You go to college, you work for another 40 or 50 years, then you retire, and hopefully retire in such a way where you can still do stuff after you quit your job. But really, my late 20s is when I started to I guess everything came to a head. It's like I will not continue doing this. I didn't necessarily have all the pieces in place yet. I knew I wanted to change. I didn't know what that was yet. But then I met my soon-to-be wife, who also worked in IT. So that's another source of income that when we combine those two things together, we have quite a bit of money to play with here. So we had a decision to make. We could either live like rock stars and have a vacation home, nice cars, expensive dinners, or we can save the vast majority of what we earn, invest as much as possible, downsize our lifestyle, and quit this stupid rat race as soon as we can so we can live a life of travel and adventure. And that's ultimately what we did.
Mm-hmm. And so you figured that out then in your late 20s, and then you're actually able to achieve, financial independence at age 35, if I'm correct?
Yeah, 35 is when I finally quit. And that seems early, and it is. It's very, very early. And I know that most people will not be able to achieve FI at that age. So I definitely recognize the position that I'm in, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to put those pieces into place. So it's not going to look the same for a lot of people, but I think financial freedom in general is way more possible for a lot more people than they realize. You might not make a lot of money, but you might be surprised at how much money can add up, how quickly your net worth can grow when you're not spending so much on things that you don't really need. And through investments and compounding interest, these things really start to add up into something pretty powerful.
Yeah. So would you say a lot of your able to achieving FI, especially early, was thanks to the, great performance of the market over the last decade or so, or more of just earning and saving hard?
Yeah, really. I mean, yeah, the market did help, but by the end of our careers, both my wife and I combined were making a little over $200,000 a
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the income for me, the income is really what it was the biggest, I guess, enabling factor in our ability to retire early, and of course, saving 70% of that combined income. I mean, when you save that much money on a yearly basis, we weren't always making 200K. That was just by the end. But we both made good salaries, and when you save those salaries, it really adds up quick.
Yeah. And were you living in a similar situation like the, off-grid living you're doing currently, or what did that look like prior to
Yeah,
the retirement?
when I was working full time, I was the typical. I lived a very typical lifestyle. A house in the suburbs in this big master planned community where I could practically spit and hit my neighbor. I was that close. We were that close to each other.
Pretty much the
So I
exact opposite of what you have currently going.
Exactly. Now I have to like run and nearly kill myself to get to my neighbor. So I mean that's a really cool position to be in, especially now with the pandemic and all that nonsense. But yeah, I had the house in the suburbs. I had the supercharged Corvette. I had the brand new Cadillac CTS, and I basically bought anything that I wanted. So I was a pretty big spender. My wife wasn't so bad. She was more of a natural saver. Certainly not the way that we saved, the last couple of years, but she was never the spender that I was. So it was a bigger problem for me than it was for her. But when you make so much money, like we were, it really makes the process of accumulating wealth easy when you put those pieces into place.
Yeah, and so when that 180 shift happened, because clearly you're not spending the way you used to. What was that? Was it like a blog you read or a book you read, or maybe it could just even be looking at the compound interest like forecasting calculator? What did that look like?
Yeah, for a lot of people, it was Mr. Money Mustache
Yeah,
is
I that's
what
what it
I
was for
connected
me.
with.
Yeah.
Exactly, because I was a software developer, he was a software developer. We came from a very similar type of background. And it just clicked. I don't necessarily remember the day, but his writing style really connected with me. He cusses in his articles. He's not very elegant, and that is exactly what I am. I'm not elegant, and sometimes I cuss on Twitter and on the blog. So that kind of language, that tone connected with me so well. And it was possible for him. And I started to think, well, maybe it's possible for me as well. And ultimately it was, once I put these pieces into place. And then for me, this is what I'm doing on Twitter, and the blog is my way of paying it forward. I'm trying to connect with as many people as possible so they might understand that that's also possible in their lives as well, even though they may not match closely to my background and being a software developer and making all the income that I was making. I think it's more possible than a lot of people think. And really, the first step in this whole process of achieving financial freedom is recognizing that you can do it. If that is never the case, if you never recognize that it's a possibility, it's probably never going to happen.
Yeah, and definitely, is that something you talk about in your book?
Yes, in my book, Big Money, it really leads you through the process of going from a very typical traditional person,
Yeah.
as I was, and I'm sure many people are, to the point where you have your financial stuff together. Everything is just kind of working. Regardless of your income, there are certain changes to your lifestyle that you can make to really downsize your life, but not sacrifice the things that you like. And if you add that little investment piece into place too, where you're making a lot of money, or at least more money than you were before, you incrementally increase your income, you increase your investments, you downsize your lifestyle, all those pieces come together into something that's truly powerful.
Yeah, and especially on social media, you hear the catchphrase like financial freedom all the time, and you usually think of like, really luxurious things and, business. Just looking at one of the early pages of the book, it says, I didn't win the lottery or sell a business. I became financially independent in the old fashioned way. I earned income and put that money to work, in bold. for me. So that's I think a really encompassing and powerful line that really speaks to the way that you don't need to obviously, win the lottery or exit a company or just have a super profitable business, that you can do the way a lot of people do, just off having a normal job.
Yeah, most people think that one of three things happened to me. One, I either won a lottery, did not happen. Wish it did, but did not happen. Number two, I got an inheritance, did not happen. Again, wish I did, but did not happen. And number three, I sold this big profitable $1 million business. Did not happen. Wish it did. But none of that actually happened. I made a good salary. I came from a good upbringing. I was raised right. So all those things I definitely appreciate. I was fortunate in that regard. But this windfall of money that people just kind of assume you need to have to be in this position. I mean, that does happen. That certainly does happen. But there's no trust fund here, man. I mean, this is all something that I built through the course of my life, and it all started with a really supportive upbringing from my folks.
Yeah, for sure. And so I was going to ask, so what does that look like when maybe you made the decision? Did you publicize it that you're like, all right, we're going to go super hard saving money, or did you more do it on the back end, or well, what were you thinking with that?
I am the type of person where when I set a goal, I like to tell as many people as I can.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is those people help keep me accountable. And even if they don't care, even if they never talk to me again, I know that they know. So mentally in my head, it's a very motivating factor for me to have other people know my goals and what I'm shooting for. So
Yeah.
from the very beginning, I started my blog. And that's what you do, I guess, when you work in IT and you have this big, massive goal, you start a blog. So in I think it was November of 2014, I penned my first article on Think, Save, Retire, which was my old blog. I sold that
Hmm.
last year. But yeah, that's where all that started. And my goal was to track my own progress, but hopefully connect with other people who are going down the same road, and to have people really keep me in line to make sure that I wasn't falling off track.
Yeah, and that's the great part about social media and our little corner of Twitter and blogs especially, is that not only can you share numbers, but people are so willing to not only share their numbers, share different, windfalls they might have gone through or different things that worked for them specifically. So it's really, really helpful. And it's also cool that you actually documented the whole process and didn't, start posting and everything. Once you had hit the goal, you came up and documented the entire thing. So now I'm excited to go and look back on the earlier articles of the blog to check out what that looked like.
Yeah, that's really what makes blogs powerful. When you
Yeah.
blog about the process as you're going through it, because you
Yeah.
get this raw emotion coming out in your stuff. And yeah, if you don't mind obscenities, go ahead and go through some of the Think, Save, Retire articles. And I think you might get a kick out of
Hmm.
what that process looked like.
Yeah, for sure. So in your Instagram bio, you mentioned essentialism. So can you go into a little deep dive with that, specifically talking about your off-grid living style with the big solar installation and all that?
Yeah, I don't like the word minimal. Minimalism minimal is like the bare, like only what's absolutely necessary or the bare minimum. That's not a positive connotation. That's not a positive phrase. It
Yeah.
doesn't ring, like it doesn't bring a smile to my face to only live on the bare minimum. I understand that minimalists don't believe that they're living on the bare minimum, and there's nuance to that. I get all that. But I think the better word is essentialism, which means living with only the things that are essential to your life, whatever that happens to be. And for us, it's living in a 100% off-grid house in the middle of the desert with 3,700 watts of solar right out there. Battery system inside. We collect our rainwater. We filter it into two big tanks, and then we filter that water before we shower and drink, obviously. So all of those things come into place where we have zero monthly expenses aside from property taxes, of course. Nothing, just no property. No expenses whatsoever, no utilities. I like the idea of not being tied to the grid. I haven't really been that way my whole life. I'm not that kind of person. I always paid my bills. I was appreciative for it. But once we started living in an RV, which was what we did right after I quit, it really got me interested in this living via the resources that you can provide for yourself. We don't grow our own food yet. That might come in the future.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
there we go.
We're not that far. We're not like survivalists. We're not preppers. But we certainly do what we can to minimize our expenses, reduce our draw on the grid, and to just be happy out here in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. And so you were featured in Market Watch right at the start of the pandemic. I remember reading some articles they loved, like, oh, now those people who are doing fire, there's no way they can survive this, everything. You did survive it, and you were featured on a, insider special with that. So could you give the audience a little bit about that, what that looked like?
I think I was down a little over
Yeah,
$200,000 in
yeah, I
net
remember
worth.
that.
Yeah, when I was recording that. And I think the pandemic has had the complete opposite effect of what you might think. This has really, I think, in many ways, invigorated the idea of fire. Maybe not the RE part, maybe not the early retirement part, because
Yeah.
that's certainly not going to be right for everybody. But I think the pandemic really proved in no uncertain terms that achieving a level of financial freedom is so smart in so many ways. Because in February, a job loss, a furlough, going to the hospital and fighting for your life was probably the last thing on your mind. Everything was great. We were all making money hand over fist. We all had jobs. Stock market was great. Nothing was going wrong. And then in a matter of about 2 weeks, everything changed. Everything changed. And I think that those of us who had a little bit of a buffer, that short-term savings, that emergency fund, were able to withstand this whole process a little bit easier. But I think those who didn't really understand some of the concepts that we talk about in the fire community to build yourself up to the point where you're not living your life in so much risk, that if something does happen, for example, a pandemic, you're not fighting for your financial life. You're not fighting necessarily for your health, because you've taken some of these steps before that happens to make sure that you can withstand some of the things that just happen every once in a while in life.
Yeah, and if you take the fire route and say you're unemployed at the time, everything hits the fan, you have money to fall back on. You have years of investments that you've been putting away. It's not like you're out of both.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that is for me, and I always say this on social media and the blog and everywhere, that your emergency fund should be your number one priority. Even debts, even if you are deep in debt, building your emergency fund is going to be your best bet, because if something happens and you don't have an emergency fund, guess what creates debt? Those exact things. Yes, bad decisions or just things that happen can create debt as well. But if you don't have any short-term savings, if anything happens, your roof springs a leak, your car needs a repair, whatever, that is going to cause you to go into debt. So that emergency fund, if you have nothing there, should always be your number one top priority, because that's going to give you a level of this foundational level and a buffer to be able to withstand things that might not happen exactly right in your life. And those things will happen from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. And so you had the nice big salary when you were working. Were there any side hustles you were using to bring any extra cash in?
Not a single one. No side hustles. I didn't do the journaling. I didn't do all these things that you hear about from all the professionals, the highly successful people do these things. I had basically one source of income aside from stock market returns and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I had one salary. My wife brought in another salary. We had our stock market investments, but we had absolutely no side hustles, no side businesses. I wasn't cutting lawns for extra money. I was doing none of that. I only relied on my salary.
Did the blog bring any like affiliate money or anything?
Eventually it
Yeah.
did. It took about a year and a half or so for it to start bringing in, a couple hundred a month here, a couple hundred a month there. By the end, it was bringing in between 1,000 and 1,500 a month. So
Oh,
that was
there we
pretty
go.
cool.
Yeah,
Of
which
course,
I mean, that's no small amount of money, just for, talking about what you're doing.
exactly. And I mean, that helped me achieve FI, but that wasn't necessarily the biggest draw. It was like the icing on the cake.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was a long process. But I guess once I really started to bring in some substantial money, I guess you can consider that a side hustle. But that only came the last year and a half or two before I actually
Hmm.
called it
And
quits.
that's the nice thing is we can go, all through, the 4% or the 3% rule, etc. Those are assuming you never make another dollar. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
you're clearly like you're actively posting on social media. You have the book and everything. You have lots of opportunities to monetize downline, if you ever wanted to.
Absolutely. And one of the major criticisms of the Trinity 4% study is it's antiquated. It's based on old data. We're living longer these days.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is true. That is true. However,
It's also a million times easier to make money these days in terms of like small
bingo.
amounts. Yeah.
Bingo, absolutely 100% correct. It's also easier to establish a side hustle because you can make money literally from your desk. You can make money by writing, by doing anything, by establishing a service online. Those things are easier now, significantly easier now than they were back when this study was actually made. So there's a bit of a balance here that I think people have to really consider when they look at the Trinity 4% study. The data might be old, but yet the possibility of making money is way easier now. So
Yeah,
those things I
and I
think
feel
balance
like,
themselves out.
if you have the mental strength and the type of commitment to put towards reaching fire, once you reach it, you have, I mean, you are the best person to comment this on like the whole world, but you have extra time to learn, extra time to apply different things that can potentially, bring in some extra money that would counter that if ever the market tanked or whatever.
The earlier that you retire, the more likely it is that you will do something to make money. You may not do that thing because you need money, because then arguably you're not truly retired if you still need money, but I don't want to get into that so much. But but I mean, the earlier you retire, that means you are probably a very creative, innovative person, and the chances of you just sitting on your ass all day doing nothing is almost non-existent. You're going to do something. You're going to find something to do. And that's one of the things that surprised me the most about early retirement
Mhm.
is how easy it is to make money if you want to. Because a lot of those opportunities, when we worked full-time jobs, we never really considered because we had a job, we were making good money.
Yeah.
So we just implicitly didn't think about those things. We didn't really acknowledge that they were there. But once we no longer have that full-time job, all of those opportunities suddenly come full force, and you can pick and choose what you think might be fun, do those things, and if you make money, that's great. But if you don't, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I definitely think of obviously when Market Watch came coming, I don't know if you ended up doing it, but like just a link to your book in the description, could have potentially been such an awesome thing and stuff like that, just speaking on, opportunities, but definitely social media. So it's cool to hear that you were just inspired and, were sharing goals and that what brought you to social media. But what keeps you on there? Is it just wanting to show other people that it's possible still?
Social media, yeah, that is the only reason why I
Mhm.
spend so much time. I really, I'm in the position where I really want to pay it forward. I want to be
Yeah.
the Mr. Money Mustache for somebody else. I'm never going to have a big blog like he is. I'm never going to be the same person, but I want to put myself in the position to connect with somebody out there, with somebody's out there, so they start putting these pieces into place just like I did. And with the emails and some of the DMs that I get from people who just started their very first emergency fund, this happened, a few weeks ago. Was the latest DM I got. I nearly had tears in my eyes because it was so meaningful
Uh-huh.
that somebody read my words and made a huge, meaningful impact in their life that absolutely brings me back to that Twitter homepage every single day.
Yeah, and just in the grand scheme of things, like social media's only been a big thing for like a decade or so. So imagine like the messages of people that are maybe, they're moving slower, they're saving, but maybe not as quick that you'll see in, 10 or 20 years when then they're 40, they're 50 or whatever, and they're, still hitting financial independence. And that's really cool to think about that they'll be able to track you down. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and that is the only thing that I could possibly ask for. I'm not here to get rich. In fact, I barely advertise
Many would
my
argue,
my
I mean,
ebook.
I've seen some of the numbers that you're doing pretty well.
I'm doing okay. I'm certainly not getting rich on my book though. I can
Oh
guarantee you
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
because I hardly advertise it.
yeah.
But yeah, this is really more of a this is what brings me meaning more than this is what brings me income. I have other things that I focused on for more of the income generation part, but this is more about the impact and the influence in the financial community more than just making an income from that.
Yeah, for sure. So besides people checking out your content, your blog, your social media platforms, do you have any recommendations of, other blogs, other books they should check out, both for money investing and investing, and then maybe just for, life, any other recommendations you have?
I always liked the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's very old, but
Yeah.
it has never really fallen out of style. All of those things that the book talks about. I don't remember the author, to be honest with you.
I have it somewhere, but I'm not going to grab it off this bookshelf right in front of me. But I
Yeah,
would recommend. Oh, all right. I'm not going to try. Stephen Covey, I think. Covey, maybe. Yeah.
yes. I think
Okay.
you're right. I think
That
you're
was a
right.
total shot in
Yes.
the dark.
Yep, that book, Atomic Habits, is good,
Just right.
and
At last, literally got it right here.
real
Next to me.
nice. How convenient. And then The Millionaire Next Door.
Yes. Yep.
That is the book.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people recommend Your Money or Your Life. That's a great book too, but
Haven't read
really
that
the book
yet, but
that
on the list. Yeah.
the one that really connected with me more than any other financial book on the face of the planet was The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
It really put these pieces into place for me mentally, how you act or how truly rich people act versus how this pseudo affluent acts. And back when I read that the first time, it was like, this is my life. Well, that was my life too. Well, that was my life too. I was making all of those stupid pseudo affluent mistakes.
Yeah.
And just being able to read those words and connect my life to what he was saying, Thomas Stanley, the late Dr. Thomas Stanley.
Yeah.
Yeah, that helped me more than I think any other book that I've ever read on the topic of finances.
Yeah. So did you read that when you were still in the more spendy phase of your life, or was it more when you were, buckling down and, accelerating towards fire?
Yeah, it was more the transition. So I had already made the decision to pursue financial independence and early retirement. So I was already buckled down, but I don't know, this book was just recommended to me. So I picked it up and I read it. And that really reinforced everything that I was doing now, because I saw myself in that old life and I definitely wanted to be on the other end of that, where you don't necessarily look and act rich. I mean, you take one look at me and you would think that I'm probably a bum, not this millionaire. So that, and that is perfectly okay with me. I don't need to look rich. I just need to be able to feel like I am rich.
Yeah.
And that's all.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, you speak a lot on essentialism, but just looking at your Instagram, it's tons of travel, obviously not right now, but it's travel, it's doing what you want. And not only is that inspiring, but it like really comes to show that once you don't have to worry about the earning side of things, that you can really transition into, really just focusing on what you're interested in. Like I think you got the home gym right behind you there.
I do. I have the home gym. In fact, I was there earlier this morning. So the
Mhm.
squat rack, the cable
Free
machine, got dumbbells
membership,
back there. So what's that?
free membership.
Free membership. That's
Very
right.
free.
That's right. And I could use it whenever I could write a paragraph. I could tweet, go do a set of dumbbell curls, come back, tweet again, go do a set of dumbbell curls.
Mhm.
It's so convenient to have everything right here. And really, I had no choice because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a gym 5 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
So if I didn't do this, I would literally have no gym.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing some insights. One final question I have for you is if you had any recommendations or just one lesson you could give your younger self, or maybe someone who's just getting started with all this, that's just come to your blog or one of your social media platforms, what would that be?
One lesson. I think I would say money. If you could think of money as a tool, not as something that needs to be spent or can be spent, I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the healthy mindset that you need to have if your desire, if your goal is to achieve financial independence. Early retirement may not be for you. if you think that you're going to just work, you love your job so much that you'll just work forever, work until the day you die, that is great. There's nothing wrong with that. However, the moment that you achieve financial freedom, that is going to expand your options significantly. You might love your boss now, but you may not love your boss in the future. Your company might be bought by another company and you just hate your life. If you're not financially independent, making that move or making changes in your life is going to be way, way tougher. So my number one piece of advice is, if you don't plan on retiring early, that's fine. But you would be let me rephrase that. It is a very smart goal to aim for financial freedom, because that is going to expand your options to the nth degree.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, just one final thing I thought of. So stocks versus bonds, individual stocks, index funds. If you want to shed a little light on what your portfolio consists of, I'd love to hear that as well.
Okay. I am not a gifted investor.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep things very simple.
Yeah.
Throughout my entire career, in fact, I loved targeted retirement funds,
mm-hmm.
which means you set a date in the future of your retirement date, whatever that happens to be. And then once you initially start investing in targeted retirement accounts, the majority of your money, which is actively managed, is going into more stocks, which means it's a little bit more risky, but yet you stand to make a little bit more money.
Yeah.
But then as you get closer to that quote unquote retirement age, those investments slowly transition over into bonds, which are less risky. And this happens automatically. So I do not pick stocks. I've never picked stocks. I never tried to time the market. I'm not that smart. I'm nowhere near that smart.
Hey, almost no one is that smart.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. So I index fund and I forget it. I target a retirement fund and I forget it. That's where the majority of my investments are in. And I'm like 70-30, I think, stocks to bonds right now. So it's still a relatively risky position, but I'm not even 40 yet. So I feel pretty confident.
Yeah. The way I think about it is, a lot of kids my age, especially I'm 22, are all into like the next hottest, like Robinhood thing, whatever. But, I'm trying to get, financially independent, successful financially, like for sure. You know what I mean? So that's what I take, that energy and just grab index funds. And then the energy and the mental fortitude I would rather put towards options, individual stocks, whatever. I use that to go get more guaranteed money while I know that index is going to be growing regardless.
That's right. It's really a beautiful thing. And we all look for an opportunity to make money when we do nothing. To make money literally as we sit on our ass.
Yeah.
And the absolute best way to do that is investments. You invest it, you do nothing. You invest it, you do nothing. You let money do what it does best, and that's grow.
Yep. All right. Well, Steve, really, really appreciate you coming on. Where can everyone find you on social media?
I hang out mostly on Twitter. It's Steve on Speed is my handle. Yeah. I created that back when I had my Corvette, so hence the on Speed
okay.
part.
I was kind of wondering that when I DM'd you this morning.
Yeah, and honestly, I would change it, but there's so many links to it that I don't want to mess with that, so I'm just kind of keeping it around. But yeah, the Steve on Speed on Twitter or steveadcock.us is my website. So those are the two.
Yeah, and that'll all be linked below, as well as your book will be linked below as well if anyone's interested in purchasing that. If you have any questions for either of us, you can reach out to either of us on social media, which will all be linked in the description. If you're listening on YouTube, I would love a like and subscription. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, we would love a rating. But I'll see you on the next episode. And we really appreciate you coming on today, Steve. Thanks a lot.
You got it. It was a pleasure.